sky, so let it be on earth displayed, till thou art here as there obeyed. Amen.
Welcome to the First Church in Chestnut Hill, to our Sunday service for July 25th, 2021. Welcome if your journey is newly joined here with this space and this people, and welcome if your journey has long been within this space and in this good community. Please note that today marks the last of our summer services, and worship will begin again on September 12th. In this in-between time, may each day offer moments of respite and pause to take in the goodness of life in all of its complexities and iterations, and may each night in this time grant you dreamful and restorative sleep and welcome you into the new day. We begin with the psalm, followed by our scripture reading. So hear now from Psalm 145, verses 10 through 18. All your works shall give thanks to you, O Lord, and all your faithful shall bless you. They shall speak of the glory of your kingdom and tell of your power, to make known all the people your mighty deeds and the glorious splendor of your kingdom. Your kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and your dominion endures throughout all generations. The Lord is faithful in all his work and gracious in all his deeds. The Lord upholds all who are falling and raises all who are bowed down. The eyes of all look to you, and you give them their food in due season. You open your hand, satisfying the desire of every living thing. The Lord is just in all his ways and kind in all his doings. The Lord is near to all who call on him, to all who call on him in truth.
Today's reading contains the Gospel of John's version of two well-known biblical events: the miracle of the loaves and fishes, or the feeding of the 5,000, and later that evening, Jesus walking on water towards his disciples who were in a boat struggling to cross a roiled-up Sea of Galilee on their way to Capernaum, a hub of the ministry of Jesus. The Gospel of John, chapter 6, verses 1 to 21. After this, Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias. A large crowd kept following him because they saw the signs that he was doing for the sick. Jesus went up the mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near. When he looked up and saw a large crowd coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they among so many people?" Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was a great deal of grass in the place, so they sat down, about 5,000 in all. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated, so also the fish, as much as they wanted. When they were satisfied, he said to his disciples, "Gather up the fragments left over, so that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up, and from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they began to say, "This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world." When Jesus realized that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into a boat, and started across the sea to Capernaum. It was now dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea became rough because a strong wind was blowing. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and coming near the boat, and they were terrified. But he said to them, "It is I. Do not be afraid." Then they wanted to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the land toward which they were going.
Today we come to the end of our summer theme of pilgrimage as we stand within the full-bellied greening freshness of July and cast a curious eye around the bend in the road for a glimpse of what lies ahead in August's horizon. As we move toward the congregation's summer pause, we do so with John's text placing us alongside Jesus, navigating the swell and the ebb of expectation, of need, and of the unanticipated. At this turn in our journey, I offer to you 3 reflection vignettes, drawing from the text, 3 travel stories, if you will, in this pilgrimage, to take along the path in the next few weeks. Place yourselves as pilgrims on the journey round an evening table or with feet up by a fire, or perhaps you are here to welcome pilgrims back in their return home, brimming with stories of adventures and wonder-working and encounters with the divine. Hear the tales and find yourself in the narrative and ponder what shimmers, what stands out and speaks in depth and breadth of meaning for you. As we step into the first story, a foremost element of John's text is that Jesus is both portrayed as a wonder worker and as a person pursued by people who want to experience something extraordinary. He's garnering a reputation as a healer, and word has gotten out. The gospel mills are churning. Sideshow curiosity commingles with actual desperation and need, and imminent need abounds. He's coming here. Let's go see what happens. He's coming nearby. Maybe he can fix me. He's coming. What might happen? Have you noticed how often Jesus and his chosen group are crossing back and forth over the Sea of Galilee in these texts of the Gospels? Their constant habit of getting into boats smacks of attempts at crowd control. Things get out of hand, people start to get roughed, we head for the boats. Jesus gets overworked, we head for the boats. It starts to get late, head for the boats. In this instance, however, this crossing does not deter the ardent crowd who, by use of their own boats or by coming along the shore, or maybe a combination of both, are pressing in and wanting more. And before starting the dinner theater show for the day, Jesus poses to his companions, "How are we going to pay for all of this, y'all? Folks have to eat, and there's not a food truck in sight. What are we going to do?" Then, wonder of wonders, meager ingredients are procured, and Jesus produces from them the miracle of the fillet of fish sandwiches for everyone there. I don't know about you, but I have listened to sermons about Jesus feeding the 5,000 throughout my life. Many times, preachers have tied themselves into theological and exegetical pretzel knots, trying to explain how such a meal was able to occur, to bend science to the will of a miracle story. That focus, however, misses the point. It is not our work to try to cram wonder-working accounts in the gospel narratives of Jesus' pilgrimage on this earth into the scientific method of the 20th century. Rather, we are here to hear them on their face, to consider them in their depth, and to discern how they are manifest in our lives today. We do not have to assert that a supernatural event occurred to know there is a truth within the account. Likewise, we do not have to dismiss an experience when we cannot explain what happened in frames that are familiar and comfortable to us. To that end, I offer you an insight from one of the many sermons preached long ago by a preacher who is now lost to the folds of my memory. What was said captured my attention, though, and continues to come and rest with me whenever the lectionary brings this story forward, even now. Perhaps the wonder-working occurred when the sharing of one child's meal reminded everyone else to pull out what provisions they had and share as well. The reminder to share resources not only ensured everyone had enough to eat, but resulted in abundance. Let that sink in. It seems like such an obvious thing to do, to share abundantly. And yet, how often do we voluntarily offer what we have without condition or expectation? No strings attached, no assessment of worthiness. How often do we frame our laws and our codes and our family and friendship relationships around the idea of sharing abundantly? We certainly would not want such parameters from God placed on us. Last week, Psalm 23 lauded the Good Shepherd who provides all our needs. But this week, John moves us off the farm and back to dealing with people and the need to care for one another. And Jesus here is like the stranger in the European folktale Stone Soup, where a mysterious stranger entices a wintry village of hungry people to pool their meager resources rather than keeping them to themselves in their homes and to celebrate a delicious and nourishing meal together. Jesus thus acts as the conduit between the wonder-working assertion of the Good Shepherd that God will provide to the reality God has already provided. And now it is up to us to recognize and share the abundance we already enjoy. A people doing that, well, that would approach wonder-working status. Another log on the fire, another cup of ale brought to the table, our pilgrim continues with yet another inexplicable account. And this time people are so taken with Jesus that they move to press him into service and name him as a king. And Jesus retreats to hide out higher up a mountain until evening, and his companions decide to get in their boats and head out without him. In the night, they encounter churning seas and winds, choppy waves, and unsettlement. And then they see Jesus walking on the water toward them with his standard greeting. "It's me. Don't be afraid." I remember the first time I walked on water. Born and raised in the deep South, I never anticipated such a thing could happen. In our neck of the woods, bodies of water are a bit suspect thanks to alligators and water moccasins that lurk in their murky depths. I am usually more than happy to stay on dry land. However, I believe it was January of 2009, a brutally cold month that year, when while on a church retreat, my then pastor's spouse invited me to step out on the lake abutting Rolling Ridge Retreat Center in North Andover, Massachusetts. And I assured her that I would be happy to remain on shore and go for help once she tried to go on the lake. She eventually convinced me to come with her, and I stepped into the ice for the first time and walked on water. It was a breathtakingly pristine January day. Cerulean blue skies and wispy clouds. A silence as there was no wind. That crystalline crispness of single-digit temperatures. And only the sound of our feet shuffling across the ice. Walking on the surface of the lake was a sacred and transformative moment for me, and something I would have never done had I not trusted implicitly the woman with me who I knew would not put me in harm's way, and who knew how to discern the likelihood of harm in this experience. It's me. Don't be afraid. It was such a remarkable moment. I ended up calling my parents from the lake to tell them I was walking on water. Transformative. And a moment almost missed if I had not been willing to trust another who knew more than me and could guide me into that lived moment. Each of our lives have these moments within them, moments when something we did not anticipate or even know was missing in our lives reveals itself and invites us to take a chance at being transformed. But to do so, we have to trust. We have to trust another person. We have to trust something that is greater and other than ourselves, or even sometimes we must do the arduous work to trust ourselves, that we are able to welcome and embody this untried, untapped, unknown experience and risk allowing goodness and blessing and benefit to flow freely. That kind of trust that enables us to walk on the choppy and the ice-stilled surfaces of life is what transformation exacts of us. That kind of trust gathers both what we know and what we do not know together and endeavors to take the first step and then the next, and then the next, along the waterways and the byways and the unmarked paths of our lives as we listen for that quiet voice guiding us, saying, "It's me. Don't be afraid." The pilgrims' stories have wound through the night, and some have gone to bed. Others are nodding in their chairs. The fire is now embers, but a few intrepid souls remain. Tell us another, pilgrim. Tell us one more story. And with such encouragement, the pilgrim sips from a cup and spins one more story into the quiet night. This time, not one of wonder working, but of blessing, of homecoming for the traveler. Whether the journey is long or cut too short. On May 4th, 2019, a young woman in Nashville, Tennessee, died from complications from a severe allergic reaction to antibiotics. At 37 years of age, she left a beloved husband, 2 small children, and a community of devoted readers in devastation and grief. Rachel Held Evans was a New York Times best-selling author and a columnist who wrote about faith and doubt and growing up in the Bible Belt of the U.S. South. Her memoir-style life writing reflected the experiences of many millennials who grew up in conservative evangelical traditions, especially women and members of the LGBTQIA+ community, only to find the theology and faith of their childhood and youth could no longer fit who and how they understood themselves to be as Christians in the 21st century. Evans' storytelling broke open complicated theologies for a public audience in a way that gave authenticity and inclusion to their comparable experiences. And in describing Rachel's understanding of Christians during her funeral, her sister Amanda remarked, quote, "What I think Rachel understood is that we are a family. And so despite the differences, the complexities, and misunderstandings, we all still gather around that table together. Because we are a family, a big, beautiful, dysfunctional, messy, nose-to-nose, formidable family. And what does family do? We intercede for one another. When one is weak, the strong pulls him up. When I cannot worship, you worship on my behalf. When you cannot believe, I believe on your behalf. We beckon one another on to good deeds and deeper faith. We belong to one another, and Rachel understood this. No matter how far afield the pilgrim journey takes us from our roots, they still reach out to us, those long, long roots of home, those long, long roots of family and tradition. We find in the most unfamiliar and sacred experiences that packed in the baggage of our hearts and minds, along with the sunscreen and the scarf and the extra pair of clean socks, lie the complexities and dysfunction and woundedness and guilt of wounding and familiar difficult cycles of habit that we tried to escape on the journey. The pilgrimage journey will always bring us home because we bring home with us wherever we run. We cannot escape whatever we flee. It comes with us until we finally engage it, sit at a table with it, and offer it a leave-taking, a freeing, or an embrace. This is the insight Evans offers us through her sister's observation. We belong to one another. When we fundamentally disagree, we cannot fathom the actions and inactions of one another. We belong to one another. In our willingness and unwillingness to seek and offer and live into forgiveness, we belong to one another. In our need to be amazed and entertained, to be healed and to rest, we belong to one another. In our having to be reminded to recognize our abundance and share indiscriminately, we belong to one another. In moments when trust of another, of God, or even ourselves is needed to take the next step, we belong to one another. And in our daily homecoming and in our life's final homecoming, we belong to one another. This mantra, we belong to one another, ties the people in John's gospel to us in a long family lineage of pilgrimage folk who continue each generation to live into the life and the teachings of the wandering Jesus. It ties us to person after person across 2,000 years who have entertained the stranger, who have shared what they had with another, who have trusted the next step into an unknown future, who have refused to dismiss a soul because of their difference. We belong to one another weaves us into a particular way of life and into a community who shares a common and complex storied legacy together. Evans herself reflected on this legacy as she described the initial early church, the very first followers of Jesus, the ones who had known him and loved him. The first thing the world knew about Christians, she says, was that they ate together. And Evans continues, at the beginning of each week, they gathered rich and poor, slave and free, Jews and Gentiles, women and men. And while each community worshiped together a bit differently, it appears most practiced communion by enjoying a full meal together. They remembered Jesus with food and stories and laughter and tears, debate, discussion, and cleanup. According to church historians, the focus of these early communion services was not on Jesus' death, but rather on Jesus' friendship. his presence made palpable among his followers by the tastes and sounds and the smells that he had loved. We are turning now to the congregation's summer pause, and yet the journey continues. May the stories spinning through your summer commingle with the stories of each person you encounter, so that when you each recall one another, it is in friendship and a presence made palpable through sharing and trust and the full awareness that we belong to one another. Amen.
We gather together to ask the Lord's blessing. He chastens and hastens his will to make known. The wicked oppressing now cease from distressing. Sing praises to his name, he forgets not his own. Beside us to guide us, our God with us joining, ordaining, maintaining his kingdom divine. So from the beginning the fight we were winning. Thou, Lord, wast at our side, all glory be thine. We all do extol thee, thou leader triumphant, and pray that thou still our defender wilt be. Let thy congregation escape tribulation, thy name be ever praised, O Lord, make us free.
As we prepare hearts, minds, and bodies to turn from this service to our lives of service in the world, we do so with words from Rachel Held Evans. There are so many new things to see, so many gifts to give and receive, so many miracles to baffle and amaze, if only we pay attention. If only we let the Spirit surprise and God catch our breath. The service is ended. Now go from this place to all of your other places as pilgrims, sharing stories and resources abundantly, trusting the unknown next step and the next, and fully claiming the beauty and the complexity of the mantra, we belong together. We belong to one another. Within your communities and within yourself, hear these words. Blessings on your journey. Go in peace.